Our next speaker is an interesting speaker. His name is Stephen Landsburg. He is a professor of economics at the University of Rochester, and he's a popular and well-read author. He has written some interesting books, some of which you may have been exposed to. The Armchair Economist. Here's a very interesting one. More Sex is Safer Sex, The Unconventional Wisdom of Economics. The Big Questions of Tackling the Problems of Mathematics, Economics, and Physics. He is a former columnist for both Slate and for Forbes. We would probably consider him a centrist, but on the subject of if we're going to tax the rich, how does the death tax fit into that, is what he would like to share with us about. And Steve, if you come up and share with us.
That is. About the more sex topic too. I'm just still reeling from being called a centrist. It's never happened before. I agree with so much of what the other speakers said, and I think you should listen to that and take it to heart. But I'm going to go off in just a slightly different direction and say a few words about how the estate tax affects the very rich and why those of us who are not very rich should care. Very rich people, they're good people, they're nice people, there might be a couple of them in this room for all I know, but there's no denying that they consume a lot of resources. They consume a lot of resources, and I would like to see them consume a little bit less so that there's a little bit more for the rest of us, and that's why I oppose the death tax. Because here's the message that the death tax sends to very rich people. It says, you can't take it with you. We're not going to let you leave it to your heirs, so you might as well spend now. Spend now. Go ahead. Burn a little more fuel. Demand a little more timber for your mansions, a little more steel for your private planes, a little more fiberglass for your yachts. And then all those resources, all that fuel, steel, timber, fiberglass, is unavailable to build factories or to build machinery for factories. So the rest of us end up with worse jobs at lower wages. All those resources that go into those yachts and private planes are unavailable to build farm machinery, so the rest of us pay higher food prices. Those resources are unavailable to build roads and mass transit and schools and hospitals. I don't begrudge anyone the fruits of his labor, but I do think we should avoid encouraging people to pick extra fruit when that leaves the trees a little barer for the rest of us. We are all living on other people's inheritances. 5 generations ago, just 5 generations ago, the average American worked 60 hours a week, took no vacations, earned the modern equivalent of $6,000 a year, approximately, rarely traveled more than a few miles from home, lived without central heat, lived without running water, and died at age 50. Today, we have better factories, better machinery, better training programs. That's why we work half as much and earn 5 times as much. We have better research institutions, better training programs for doctors, better drugs, better hospitals. That's why we live longer. Where'd all that stuff come from? Where'd we get all that stuff? Where'd we get all those factories and hospitals and schools and kitchen appliances? They were all built out of resources that were available because somebody chose not to consume them. And the reason somebody chose not to consume them was because somebody was being frugal. And in many cases, they were being frugal because they were planning to leave a bequest. Had there been no estate tax, more people would have been more frugal, there would have been more resources available, and the rest of us would have been correspondingly better off. So you don't need rich parents to be a victim of the estate tax. You don't even need a family business or a family farm to be a victim of the estate tax. All you need is to be somebody who works in a factory or shops in a grocery store or goes to a school or gets sick and visits a hospital. I'm not just making this stuff up. One of the great insights and driving ideas of modern economics is that taxes are often most harmful when they encourage overconsumption. That's an insight that was first made explicit by Professor Chris Chamley at Harvard University in 1986, and now we have had an explosion. For 25 years, there's been an explosion of research confirming Chamley's basic insight. You know, it's important not to confuse the issue of the death tax on the one hand with the issue of who should be paying how much taxes on the other hand. We can disagree about who should be paying how much and who should pay more and who should pay less, and should the very rich be paying more and should the very rich be paying less. We can disagree about that. But even if your goal is to soak the rich, even if that's your goal, if you're out to soak the rich, you don't need a death tax to do it. You could do it, for example, with a heavily graduated consumption tax, with a tax where every year you get a tax form that says, how much did you make this year? How much did you save? Now pay tax on the difference. And if you give us that tax code, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to get in a big fight about what the top bracket should be. And that's a legitimate fight. That's a legitimate disagreement about legitimate policy goals. The point is that we can disagree. We can disagree about who should pay how much, but we still ought to be able to agree that whatever they're paying, there are smart and dumb ways to make them pay it. And the smart ways are better than the dumb ways. Look, every tax discourages work. Every tax discourages risk-taking. That's unfortunate, but it's true. And it's a reason to be hesitant before you raise any tax. But the death tax is a double whammy. It compounds the damage by not only discouraging work and discouraging risk-taking, but encouraging overconsumption on top of that. And so my message is, if you're out to tax the rich, if that's your goal, then for goodness sake, at least do it in a way that minimizes the collateral damage to the poor.
Steve, thank you for your insights.